4 people have died and 3 others injured, possibly 3 more unaccounted for in the wake of a fire in an abandoned 3-story building in Johannesburg's Jeppestown. It comes nearly a year after the Mlungisi building blaze that claimed 76 lives. What happened here? And why is the city of Johannesburg unable to prevent such tragedies from happening? We talk now to the Johannesburg MMC for Human Settlement, Mlungisi Mabaso. Good morning to you, MMC, and thank you very much for joining us on the program this morning. It's another hijacked building, it's another tragedy, and residents say it resembled an informal settlement with shacks and partitions that were erected inside. So it sounds quite similar to the conditions that we heard about at the Mlungisi building. What do you know about what happened here?
Well, thank you very much, and greetings to yourself and the viewers at home. Well, they are quite correct to indicate that it was a building which was an informal settlement inside, because there were informal structures which were erected even on the rooftop. There were informal structures that were there. The building is privately owned by a certain company that we are still tracking down as the municipality, which an indication that the building was hijacked and it was illegally occupied. But yes, of course, we acknowledge what happened, considering the previous incident that we had witnessed in the inner city. And yes, as the city, we are, in fact, we take responsibility over what had happened, because we are mandated to provide accommodation for our residents. And that's why we are working around the clock to find a permanent solution to the challenges that our residents faces in the inner city, especially with regards to illegal occupation and the hijacking of properties.
MMC, when you say you take responsibility for what has happened, what do you mean exactly?
We actually understand that it is our responsibility to provide accommodation. So in the absence of that, we must, as the city, take responsibility over that. And that's why yesterday we went on site together with the executive mayor and the other MMCs so that we are able to provide an alternative accommodation, provide social reliefs, and also work towards finding a permanent accommodation for them. Because, I mean, it's a constitutional imperative that we provide decent accommodation for every citizen in the country. And as the city, we are also mandated to do the same. Hence, I'm indicating that we need to take responsibility in the shortages of decent accommodation in the city, understanding very well that human settlements is a concurrent function of the national and the provincial government. But we are accredited at the city, and we have a role to play to make sure that we deal with these issues, especially in the inner city and other parts of the city of Johannesburg.
MMC, and this should be done before a tragedy happens, right? Not just after.
Yeah, well, I think you'll have an appreciation of the challenges that the city faces with regards to the inner city. One, it speaks to the issues of resources that we need to, in fact, to deploy in the inner city to deal with those challenges. There, it speaks to the issues of law enforcement within the inner city to deal with issues of criminality. It speaks to the issues of illegal immigration in the inner city that requires the intervention of Home Affairs. So it's not, a responsibility that the city can be able to carry alone, considering the amount of work and the resources that are required for us to deal with all these challenges. And that's why the Office of the Mayor, through the city manager, is finalizing or concluding a report which will give a clear indication on how we are going to deal with these challenges and how we are going to bring in other institutions to assist in keeping all these challenges that we've been battling within the inner city.
This tragedy happened, despite the recommendations of the Gampepe report into the Usundiso building, and I'll get to the details of that in just a moment. But the fact that, again, even a year after Usundiso, where the country mourned together with the families of those victims, today, again, we mourn with families of other victims. And notwithstanding these challenges, which one can well appreciate that you've just shared with us now, it seems as if this problem is bigger than the city's ability to deal with it and to stop it.
Well, that's why we are inviting the provincial government, the national government, the private sector to collaborate with the city of Johannesburg, because we understand the task ahead of us and the resources that are required. And we appreciate that the provincial government has actually committed, the national government has actually committed, and the report which I've alluded to, which the city manager is busy with, is also trying to respond to the recommendations by the commission, because we do need to respond and adhere to the directive that have been provided to the city of Johannesburg by the commission.
So, just to go back to the Gampepe report, how seriously do you take this report into the Usundiso fire? Because what it did was highlight a number of different and very important things that you have to deal with. Failures by the city of Johannesburg to prevent the loss of life. The report outlined how proper processes were not followed at the time to properly convert this building into a residential building, which was then forcibly taken over or hijacked, to use the term that you just used. The city of Johannesburg failed to prevent or to eliminate hazards. There was a violation of a raft of public bylaws, a lot of building regulations that were just bypassed, and placed responsibility directly at your feet as the city of Johannesburg. So, what are some of the activities or the actions that you've taken on to really take that report to heart? I mean, was this building inspected? Was the city aware that this building existed? Because the people had been living there for quite a while.
Well, there are a lot of buildings that are privately owned in the inner city, and I think the city will not have, an understanding of the activities that occurs or that take place within those privately owned properties. But yes, of course, we take the report serious. Hence, the city manager having to commence a process of developing this program in response to what the recommendations and the findings of the Gampepe Commission, has detected or recommended to the city of Johannesburg. So that report, when it's completed, then it will then be communicated and shared with the public, so that they also understand how the city is intending to respond to the recommendations and the findings of the commission, and also the resources that must also be attached to the program, so that at least everyone understand what needs to be done to deal and address these issues that were founded by the commission when it was interviewing and prosecuting on this matter.
And again, MMC, we can have an appreciation for all the process and the bureaucracies and the agencies and the coordination, the agencies that have to work together and coordinating all of that. But, from our vantage point, we see, these buildings are visible. If you drive through the inner city, you can see which buildings don't seem to be operating as they should, privately owned or hijacked. These are not things that, you have to leave to a report or the result of an extensive investigation. The city has to be proactive in being able to go out there and even by sight, knock on the door, find out, be engaged and invested in what's happening in the city. How are you doing that work? Do you go, have you been, across the Johannesburg CBD, the inner city? Do you go personally with your team to go and have a look at these buildings and start to, proactively on your own determine which have been hijacked or which have simply just been, left derelict?
Well, there are processes in that regard, and there are other institutions that are mandated to do inspections, to enforce, bylaws, and also deal with illegal connections if there are illegal connections. So there are other institutions that are responsible for
Yeah, I'm
that.
asking about you though,
And in
MMC. Have you
terms,
gone with
and
your team physically on the ground, have a look at what's happening? I mean, we'll come to some of the other responsibilities that no doubt will take up a lot of your time. But this is a big issue. It's a time bomb. We've seen death and misery in the Johannesburg inner city wrought by hijacked buildings. Have you been there physically yourself? Have you done some inspections with your team?
well, that's what I'm actually trying to say. We confine ourselves to what we are mandated to do. So we do not enforce and we do not do inspections. And that's what I'm trying to say there are other departments and institutions that are actually mandated to perform exactly what you are alluding to. As the Department of Human Settlements, our responsibilities does not, in fact, cover the enforcement of bylaws and also to conduct inspections and also to deal with the illegal connections and
Don't
so
you think
forth.
that it
So
should?
we
Don't you
rely-
think that it should, MMC, in the sense that everyone should be working together? The minute you work in silos and the one hand doesn't know what the other hand is doing, we're not going to get the urgency and the traction that's needed to get rid of this problem. It is a very unique problem. Should you not be working together? Yes, one can understand that there are certain things and responsibilities in your remit and things that fall outside. But where's the collaboration? Where's the sense of urgency that something needs to happen that is different to what's happened before to prevent the loss of life and for criminality to simply thrive in the inner city?
And I think that's what the report by the city manager is trying to address. Hence, I've alluded to say the city manager is completing a report which will give a clear direction on what should be done in addressing all the issues that we are raising. And I think we need to give opportunity for the report to be presented so that we understand the role each department needs to play, each institution and the private sector needs to play, so that there is a collaborated effort in addressing all these issues that we are raising. But that report is meant to address exactly what you are raising.